You know that precise instant when your whole universe implodes not with a rumble, but with a deafening, silent crack that splits your reality clean in two? That moment when the floor beneath your feet doesn't just tremble, it vaporizes, and you're suspended in freefall, clawing at empty air, watching every memory you've ever treasured curdle into something unrecognizable, something poisoned at the root? That was me, 9:47 p.m. on a sweltering, suffocating Friday night in Austin, Texas. The kind of night where the cicadas in the live oaks drone like a chorus of bad omens, where the air conditioning works overtime and still can't quite cut the humidity, and where the sky outside is a bruised purple, threatening a storm that never seems to break. I was standing barefoot on the cool travertine tile of my living room, the glow of a cell phone screen illuminating my face like a pale ghost, and in my trembling hand, I held not a device, but a detonator. The phone belonged to my husband, Marcus Hayes. He'd left it behind on the reclaimed wood coffee table, a gorgeous slab of pecan sourced from a mill in Fredericksburg, sitting next to a half-empty glass of Garrison Brothers bourbon and a stack of architectural blueprints for a new high-rise going up on Congress Avenue. It was an accident, the kind of mundane slip every busy professional makes 100 times. He'd gone down the hall to check on our son William's calculus homework, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood, and the screen was still lit, a text notification hovering there like a wasp with its stinger poised. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times in the intervening years, wondering if ignorance might have been kinder, if the truth was a gift I never should have unwrapped. But the name on the preview wasn't one I recognized, and the first line snagged me like a barbed hook through the heart. I know what you did. I know about the affair. My stomach didn't just drop, it cratered. I felt the blood drain from my face as if someone had pulled a plug. I swiped the screen open with a finger that felt numb and disconnected from my body. The message unfurled into a venomous, sprawling paragraph from a contact saved only as V. It spoke of lies, of exposure, of someone deserving to know the truth. It dripped with malice and the kind of intimate knowledge that only comes from watching someone's life from very close range. My fingers moving entirely independent of my rational brain, scrolled up and up and up. Threads upon threads, hundreds of messages dated back months and then years, painting a picture so grotesque and so elaborate that I could barely draw breath. Here's the twist, the part that still wakes me up at 3 a.m. With my heart hammering, there was no mistress. No secret lover, no other woman. The affair Marcus was having was with his own destruction, a slow-motion suicide of reputation and freedom. My name is Victoria Hayes. I'm 43 years old, a top-producing luxury real estate agent in Central Texas, a woman who built her entire life on gut instincts and the unshakable belief that truth is the best curb appeal you can offer. For 21 years, I had been married to Marcus Hayes, a man whose architectural designs dotted the Austin skyline like signature strokes on a canvas, whose disarming smile could charm a skeptical loan officer out of their last basis point. We had what everyone around us called the postcard perfect life, a custom-built modern farmhouse in the hills of Westlake with a sprawling lawn of St. Augustine grass, a saltwater pool that sparkled like crushed diamonds under the relentless Texas sun, and a wraparound porch where we'd drunk our coffee every morning for 2 decades. 2 beautiful children, Sophia, 19, a sophomore at the University of Texas, studying investigative journalism with a ferocity that made my chest swell. With pride, and William, 16, a high school kid with his father's uncanny knack for sketching and his mother's stubborn streak. Buddy, or aging golden retriever who still believed he was a lap-sized puppy and who had seen our family through every joy and every sorrow with a wagging tail. A charming little vacation cottage on Mustang Island where we'd spent every summer teaching the kids to fish, and a sleek ski condo in Taos for winter escapes. We were that family. The one the neighborhood Facebook group quietly envied. The one whose Christmas card photo always looked suspiciously effortless. But standing there in the flickering blue glow of that phone, the entire facade cracked wide open like a frozen lake under too much weight. The messages from V, a woman I would later know as Vanessa, A name now etched into my nightmares weren't romantic. They were a slow-motion blackmail operation. Vanessa, I pieced together from the sprawling threads, was a former colleague of Marcus's sister, Miranda. She had stumbled onto a secret so explosive it could shatter multiple lives, and she had decided to cash in not with the authorities, but by bleeding my husband dry, one threat at a time. She knew that Marcus had been plotting to take the fall for a serious felony, a felony committed not by him, but by his sister, Miranda Hayes. Miranda Hayes was my sister-in-law, a woman I had welcomed into my home for countless Thanksgivings, who had toasted us with trembling champagne at our wedding, who had held my newborn daughter Sophia in her arms and wept with what I believed was pure joy. She was also, I now learned, a financial advisor at a large, prestigious firm in Dallas, and according to the sickening breadcrumb trail on Marcus's phone, she had been systematically embezzling money from her clients for over 5 years, nearly $1 million siphoned from retirement accounts, college funds, the life savings of elderly couples who trusted her implicitly. The FBI's white-collar crime division was closing in, the net tightening with every passing week. Vanessa, who had worked in the same office and who possessed a predator's instinct for weakness, had discovered the scheme and decided not to report it. Instead, she began squeezing Marcus. She threatened to expose the entire sordid mess to the authorities, to the media, and most pointedly, to me, unless he paid her increasingly exorbitant sums. But Marcus, my brilliant, tragically misguided husband, had concocted a different and far more devastating kind of sacrifice. He wasn't just paying Vanessa. He had made the incomprehensible decision to confess to the crime himself, to shield his little sister from prison, to become a human shield made of misplaced loyalty and a lifetime of manipulated guilt. He'd been quietly siphoning our joint assets for months, liquidating a secret brokerage account I knew nothing about, and even drafting a false, detailed confession narrative that would stand up to initial scrutiny. His phone was a graveyard of draft statements, encrypted messages with a criminal defense attorney he'd secretly retained, and Vanessa's relentless, gloating taunts. The floor beneath me didn't just disappear, it inverted. I was standing in the same beautiful living room where we had hosted Christmas brunches for 30 people, where we had celebrated Super Bowl victories and birthday parties and anniversaries, and I was a complete stranger in my own life. The photographs on the mantel, Marcus and me at the Eiffel Tower, the kids in their Halloween costumes, my mother holding Sophia as a baby seemed to mock me, artifacts from a timeline that had turned out to be a fiction. I didn't scream. I didn't rush to the garage and hurl the phone against the exposed brick wall we'd paid a fortune to preserve. I set it down on the coffee table with a gentleness that surprised me, the way you handle a live grenade with the pin already pulled. My real estate brain kicked in, the cool, analytical part of me that could walk into a distressed property and instantly catalog every structural defect, every hidden water stain, every potential exit strategy. I was in a distressed marriage now, and I needed a full, uncompromising inspection. I needed evidence. I needed a plan. Over the next 72 hours, I became a ghost in my own house. I smiled at breakfast, poured Marcus his coffee, kissed him on the cheek, asked about his day. I laughed at his jokes and discussed weekend plans. Meanwhile, with the quiet, methodical precision of a forensic auditor, I was excavating his digital life. I found emails he thought he'd deleted, archived in hidden folders labeled Project Sandbag. I traced financial transfers to a credit union in Lubbock, a small, nondescript institution I'd never even heard of. I read text threads between him and Miranda that began with, "Don't worry, I've got this handled," and ended with chilling reassurances like, "She won't find out. She never does." I discovered that he had already signed a notarized affidavit claiming full responsibility for the embezzlement, backdated and carefully crafted to look like a confession made under the duress of a guilty conscience. It was a suicide run, a self-immolation disguised as brotherly love. And the woman he was immolating himself for wasn't asking. She was demanding. Something about Miranda's messages to Marcus didn't sit right. The tone wasn't grateful or even remorseful. It was cold, commanding, subtly mocking. In one particularly venomous thread from 6 months prior, She had written, "You owe me. Marcus, after everything I did for you when Dad died, after I held this family together while you were off building your perfect life with your perfect wife, you owe me your life. Don't you dare forget that." In another, the words that made my blood run absolutely cold, "Victoria is the obstacle. If she gets wind of this, she'll go straight to the cops without a second thought. You need to keep her distracted and in the dark until it's all done. Give her a vacation, a project, whatever it takes. She cannot know." I wasn't just an obstacle to Miranda. I was a target. And a target in her world wasn't just something you avoided. It was something you eliminated. I hired a forensic accountant the next morning, a retired IRS agent named Ruth Kowalski. Ruth worked out of a cramped, fluorescent-lit office in a strip mall in Round Rock, squeezed between a nail salon and a payday loan outfit. She was a small, ferocious woman in her late 60s with steel gray hair pulled into a severe bun and a nose for deceit sharper than any bloodhound. I gave her access to everything. I had Marcus's hidden account numbers, Miranda's known aliases, the encrypted message fragments I'd managed to screenshot before they disappeared. Ruth listened in silence, her expression growing grimmer by the minute. "Mrs. Hayes," she said when I'd finished, her voice a low, gravelly rasp, "I've tracked embezzlers through shell companies in the Caymans, through crypto wallets in Estonia, through family trusts, so tangled they'd make a Supreme Court justice weep. Give me a week. I'll find you the truth, and it won't be pretty." It took her 5 days. What she handed me, in a thick, tabbed dossier that smelled faintly of toner and coffee, belonged in a true crime documentary. Miranda hadn't just stolen from her firm. She had been constructing an elaborate, multi-layered frame job with my name and my identity planted squarely at the center. She'd opened a shell corporation in Delaware called Victoria's Ventures LLC, a name so on the nose it was almost insulting, and had routed nearly $200,000 of the stolen funds through its accounts. She'd registered a domain name that mimicked my real estate business and sent sophisticated phishing emails to my actual clients, complete with my photo and my brokerage's logo. She'd planted evidence on my personal laptop malware I had unknowingly downloaded months earlier from a link she'd sent me, disguised as a client contract. That malware gave her backdoor access to my files, my emails, my calendar, and in the most chilling discovery of all, she had drafted a series of anonymous emails to the Texas Department of Public Safety and the FBI tip line, posing as a concerned citizen, alleging that I was laundering drug money through luxury home sales in the Austin area. She had created a paper trail so convincing, so meticulously detailed, that if Marcus had ever gotten cold feet, or if the FBI had knocked on our door first, I would have been the perfect patsy, the ambitious wife with access to large, unexplained sums of cash, a plausible motive, and absolutely no alibi. I would have been arrested at my children's school or at a closing table, my reputation incinerated on the evening news, my life destroyed in a single afternoon. The woman was a sociopath wrapped in Talbot's cashmere, a predator who had weaponized family love into a shield and a sword, and Marcus, my husband of over 2 decades, the man who had promised to cherish and protect me, was her willing, docile puppet. He wasn't just a victim, though Ruth made it clear he had been manipulated for years. He was complicit in a conspiracy that, if fully executed, could have landed me in a federal penitentiary, separated from Sophia and William for decades, my good name dragged through the mud beyond any hope of recovery. The night I confronted Marcus, I did it with the same methodical precision I applied to everything. I set the stage carefully, the long farmhouse dining table cleared of all its usual clutter and adorned with only 3 things: Ruth's dossier, his phone, and a single silver-framed photograph of our children on their first day of school, gap-toothed and beaming with innocent joy. When Marcus walked in, still dusted with a fine layer of sawdust from a construction site visit in East Austin, I watched the boyish hope in his eyes, the hope that tonight was just another ordinary Friday night, with takeout and Netflix flicker and die as he registered the expression on my face. I had not cried. I had not raged. I had simply become a stranger in my own kitchen, and it terrified him. "Sit down, Marcus. We need to talk about Miranda. And Vanessa." and Project Sandbag, and the affidavit sitting in your desk drawer. The conversation that followed lasted over 6 hours. It was an excavation of nearly 2 decades of secrets, a grueling, tear-soaked autopsy of a marriage that had been quietly rotting from within. There was shouting that echoed off the vaulted ceilings, tears that soaked through his shirt and mine, a shattered coffee mug that we swept up together in a surreal, silent interlude. He crumbled, piece by piece, confessing that after his father's sudden death 15 years ago, Miranda had stepped into a quasi-maternal role for him, a psychological hold he had never been able to escape. She had convinced him, with years of calculated conditioning, that family takes care of family, no matter the moral cost. When the embezzlement was exposed internally by a junior analyst, Miranda had called him in a wild panic, sobbing, threatening self-harm, reminding him of every sacrifice she'd ever made. And he had stepped forward without thinking, driven by a toxic, deep-seated cocktail of guilt, obligation, and a lifetime of being told he was the protector. He never intended for me to get hurt. He truly, naively believed he could contain the explosion, serve a few years in a minimum security prison, and somehow emerge to find us all waiting, unscathed and understanding. It was breathtaking in its arrogance, devastating in its blindness. But when I slid the pages showing my name on Miranda's shell company, showing the phishing emails sent to my clients, showing the anonymous tips drafted to destroy me, something inside Marcus shattered so completely I could almost hear it. He lurched to the kitchen sink and vomited. He sobbed with his face in his hands until his voice gave out entirely. And then, red-eyed, hollowed out, and trembling, he said the only words that could possibly have saved us. The only words I needed to hear. I will help you take her down. Whatever it costs. Whatever I have to do. I will help you. I didn't forgive him that night. I wasn't sure I ever could. Forgiveness felt like a distant continent I might never reach. But I believed the raw, ragged authenticity of his remorse, and I needed him as a cooperative witness. Together, we contacted the FBI's Austin field office the next morning. I sat across from 2 special agents, a sharp, quiet woman named Rodriguez, and a stocky, intense man named Chen, and I handed over Ruth's dossier. The digital evidence, the notarized false confession, and Marcus's sworn, tearful cooperation. The agents treated me with the kind of grave, almost reverential respect you accord someone who has just willingly handed over their own family, their own life, to the machinery of justice. Miranda was arrested on a bright, ordinary Tuesday morning in her office overlooking the Dallas Arts District. The FBI's cybercrime team simultaneously seized her servers, froze her accounts, and uncovered a trail of victims stretching back over a decade: elderly widows, small business owners, families saving for their children's futures, all systematically drained by the woman they trusted. The federal indictment, unsealed with the kind of media fanfare that makes my stomach clench just to remember, listed 12 counts: wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, money laundering, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and a host of related charges. The sentencing exposure was north of 20 years. The story hit the Texas business pages like a tornado, complete with grainy photos of Miranda in handcuffs under the headline, "Prominent Dallas Advisor Accused of Multi-Million-Dollar Embezzlement and Family Betrayal." The trial, held in the austere federal courthouse in downtown Austin, was a circus I never bought a ticket for, but was forced to attend. The gallery was packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and the hollow-eyed faces of Miranda's victims. I testified for 2 grueling days, my voice somehow steady as I detailed every lie, every manipulated conversation, every moment of cold dread. Marcus took the stand in an ill-fitting suit that seemed to swallow him whole, his voice cracking and barely audible as he confessed his own profound culpability and described, with painful clinical detail, Miranda's decades-long psychological grip. The defense, a slick Dallas attorney paid for by funds we later learned were stolen, tried to paint Marcus as a disgruntled husband seeking revenge and me as a scorned, vindictive wife. But the documents, the digital forensics, the sheer weight of Ruth's accounting, and the damning testimony of the dark web contact Miranda had engaged didn't lie. The jury was out for less than 4 hours. The verdict, when it came, was a single word repeated 12 times: guilty. 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 When the verdict was read, Miranda locked eyes with me across the courtroom. The hatred in them was a physical force, a heat I could feel on my skin. She didn't scream, didn't rage. She simply mouthed a single, chilling word: someday. The judge, a stern woman with no patience for theatrics, sentenced her to 22 years at FMC Carswell, a federal medical center that housed a prison camp. She would be nearly 60 years old when she saw freedom again. I watched her being led away in chains, her blazer wrinkled and her unwashed hair hanging limply, and I felt a surge of something raw and complex, not joy, not triumph, but a grim, bone-deep, exhausted relief. The predator who had stalked my family for decades was finally, truly caged. But the wreckage of my marriage, my family, and my own sense of self remained. Scattered and smoking like a battlefield after the armies have retreated, Marcus voluntarily entered an inpatient mental health facility for 30 days to address what the clinicians diagnosed as severe codependency and trauma-bonded manipulation stemming from his childhood. He later pled guilty to a single count of misprision of a felony, knowing about a crime, and failing to report it, and received 3 years of supervised probation, along with 500 hours of community service. The district attorney, in a rare acknowledgement of genuine contrition and comprehensive cooperation, declined to seek prison time. I didn't push for harsher punishment. I was too exhausted, too shattered, and too busy trying to stitch my children's fractured worlds back together. Sophia took a medical leave of absence from UT. The daughter who had once idolized her Aunt Miranda was now grappling with the reality that the woman who had taught her to bake snickerdoodles had been plotting her mother's destruction. We sat together on the back porch one evening that autumn, the Texas sun bleeding orange and pink into the hill country, and she turned to me with eyes that looked a decade older. "Mom," she said, her voice small and raw, "how do you ever trust anyone again? How do you ever believe that someone isn't just waiting to stab you in the back?" I didn't have a tidy Hallmark card answer. I took her hand, calloused from years of softball, and said, "One day at a time, sweetheart." And with a really, really good therapist, William, at 16, retreated into a world of dark, intricate sketches. His art teacher pulled me aside at a parent conference and showed me a portfolio of cityscapes elaborate, Gothic towers crumbling into shadow, bridges that led nowhere. "He's processing," the teacher said gently. "This is his language right now." So I held him more than I ever had before. I sat with him in silence while he drew. I brought him hot chocolate and didn't ask questions. And slowly, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, color began to seep back into his work, a blue sky here, a green tree there. As for Marcus and me, we rebuilt like a condemned building that had been gutted to its foundation. Every rotten beam was identified, removed, and replaced with agonizing, relentless honesty. We still live in the Westlake farmhouse. The memories are too deep to abandon, but we repainted the walls a warm, soft gray instead of the cool white Miranda had once recommended. We sold the ski condo and the island cottage, paring our lives down to what truly mattered. We established an airtight family trust, with multiple signatories required for any major transaction, so no single person could ever again put our security at risk. We talk, sometimes until 3 a.m., about the decades of unspoken pressure and childhood trauma that made Marcus so heartbreakingly susceptible to Miranda's hooks. He is in weekly therapy. I am in weekly therapy. Our marriage is on a kind of permanent probation, a daily renewal of the choice to be radically, uncomfortably honest. 2 years have passed since that night. I still sell luxury real estate across Central Texas, and paradoxically, business has never been stronger. Clients who followed the trial came away with the image of a woman who could spot a crooked foundation from 100 yards away, and they want that woman negotiating their biggest life decisions. I was profiled in the Austin Board of Realtors magazine, not for the scandal, but for my outspoken advocacy around financial transparency and fraud prevention in high net worth transactions. I speak now at women's conferences and business luncheons about recognizing the subtle signs of coercive control, about learning to trust the small, insistent whisper in your gut that tells you something is deeply, dangerously wrong. I've even launched a modest podcast called Title Deeds and Deceit, recorded in the guest room closet for the soundproofing, where I interview forensic accountants, trauma therapists, and survivors of family betrayal. It's raw, it's unpolished, and it is entirely, authentically mine. Miranda still writes me letters from Carswell Long. Looping screeds filled with biblical quotations, conspiracy theories, and searing blame for the ruination of her destiny. I don't read them anymore. My lawyer forwards them, unopened, to a dusty file box in the attic that I've labeled Tax Records 2019. I've learned that forgiveness isn't a gift you wrap up and hand to the person who wronged you. It's a lien release you file on your own heart. A legal clearing of a debt that was never yours to carry. I haven't forgiven Miranda Hayes. I may never be capable of that, but I have successfully, triumphantly evicted her from the rent-free space she occupied in my head for so many years. The most profound and lasting lesson, however, came from that single crystalline moment at 9:47 p.m., standing barefoot on cool travertine, holding a phone that felt like a live explosive. I learned that the people we love can be simultaneously wonderful and profoundly wounded, and that the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves to protect them from the consequences of their own choices. Marcus wasn't a monster. He was a deeply broken man who had been ensnared since childhood in a web spun by a master manipulator. But that recognition doesn't absolve him. He had to earn his way back, inch by grueling inch, and he is still earning it every single day. I had to learn in my bones that strength isn't about burning everything to the ground in a blaze of righteous fury. Sometimes real strength is knowing when to walk away. And sometimes even harder, it's knowing when to stay and rebuild something new on the still smoking ashes. Now, every Friday night at 9 p.m., I put my phone in a drawer in the kitchen. Marcus and I walk out to the back deck with a bottle of wine, or sometimes just tall glasses of iced tea, and we sit in the old Adirondack chairs, watching the lightning bugs flicker in the live oaks. The cicadas buzz their ancient, rhythmic song, and I've stopped hearing them as a bad omen. They sound like summer. They sound like persistence. They sound like life finding a way to continue, even in the relentless Texas heat. If this story struck a nerve or made you think about the secrets hidden in your own world, please take a moment to tap that like button. It's a small click that genuinely helps this channel grow and reach more people who need these stories. Then, I'd love for you to drop a comment. Have you ever discovered a secret that completely reframed your past? How did you find the courage to move forward? I read every single comment, and this community is built on the strength of shared experience. Make sure you're subscribed and have the notification bell turned on. I post powerful, immersive stories of betrayal, resilience, and redemption every single day at 7 a.m. Eastern, and you don't want to miss what's coming. If someone you know is walking through a family betrayal or struggling to trust again, share this video with them. Sometimes, a story is the only proof we need that we're not alone in the dark. Got a story idea of your own, or a situation you'd like me to weave into a future video? Leave it in the comments or send it through the link in the description. I might just bring your story to life next. Until then, keep your eyes open. Trust that quiet voice inside you, and remember the people who are meant to be in your life will never ask you to shrink, to lie, or to sacrifice your own truth for their comfort. You deserve a foundation that holds. See you tomorrow.